I have a story that's most people wouldn't believe me even if I told them, but I can swear it is absolute the truth. This happened about 10 years ago, around 2013, when I was just 25 years old. And I can say this, I hope that I will never cross any path with this particular guy ever again. He was a complete nightmare. And it not only happened to me, but also to my then girlfriend, now wife, Natalie. My name is Daryl, by the way. About 10 years ago, me and my girlfriend, Natalie, have been dating for a while, but we weren't living together. But I was, at the time, I did actually had a roommate. But sadly, my roommate had to move out, and I was, well, in a tight spot. Since my place was a little bit the high rent, and and when my former roommate lived with me, we split the bills on the rent and all that. And even though I do had a job, a well-paid job, but the rent was a little bit more than what I was getting from my salary. So I started looking around for any of my friends who needed a place to stay, if it was just temporarily or permanent. Unfortunately, none of my friends were even looking for to be a roommate with someone. I mean, my friends had no problem with me. But I was considering to ask my girlfriend, Natalie, which I did, but she wasn't looking for a place to live, well, with me anyway, since we had just only been dating for, at that point, about 6 months. So we were not ready yet to move in because we weren't sure if this relationship was gonna be a long term or just a short one. So I mean, it makes sense, and I respected her wishes. Not that she didn't want to stay with me in my place, but she did spend the night from time to time. But that's it. So I just thought about why not to just look around for a new roommate, since my former roommate had paid for the month of it already. And if I didn't have a roommate for by the end of the next month, I may have to just move out. And I didn't want to move back with my parents. Well, I'm not against that, but if it would have come to that, maybe. But then I thought, why not to just look around on different places like online, like Facebook Market or Craigslist. I thought about looking at Craigslist first. I did actually post it on an ad. I was looking for a roommate and only that someone who is willing to split half of the bills of the rent and also help around in the apartment if needed. I did had a few calls, but some of them were just simply trying to lower the, their responsibility to being able to pay off the bills or the rent. And I was like, I'm afraid not, and it wasn't looking good. It took maybe just about 2 weeks when I actually was getting a response from a guy named Mark. Mark was about 2 years older than me, and he was looking for a place as a roommate. So I gave him a call. And on the phone call, he did seems like a more decent, well-respected, mannered guy. And I told him that he's willing to come over to just to see the place first, just in case if he was really interested. And he came over the next day, and sure enough, he was like me, 6 feet tall, blonde guy, blue eyed, and it's like, okay, seems to be a decent guy. And he look around the apartment, like hit the room, the spare room, the kitchen, living room, the bathroom, all that places. So, and he said, I take it. I was like, I hit the jackpot, kinda. So I went with him to the landlord, and we signed a contract. And within a few days, he started moving in his things, and it wasn't that much. I think it had only 2 boxes at most. There was just some clothes and some personal belongings. I told him that the bills had already been paid for. Well, the rent had already been paid for this month. and he asked me about my former roommate. I told him it was a friend of mine, but he had to move out after he was going to live with his girlfriend. So, and he said that he understood that. So, for the next couple of days after we're that, we seems to be going well. We sometimes just sit down in after people taking home from work. We just have dinner. We took turns to make dinner, and I had to say he was the perfect roommate. But if I had known about his odd behavior and his nightmarish terror, I would not have accepted him. I should have done some background check on him first of all, but I unfortunately didn't. Anyways, ever since when he moved in, everything was actually just well respected. Even when my family or my friends came over, I introduced him to them and they all seem to like him. He has this charming personality, and even when I actually introduced Natalie to Mark, he seems to be getting a liking to her, like as a good friend terms like that. And but even after the first time when Natalie was talk to him, she told me afterwards that he had this kind of bit strange vibes from him. She couldn't explain exactly what kind of vibes. It was like it was something about him that she couldn't put her finger on it. I was like, maybe you're just too tired, or maybe that you're nervous at meeting a new person. I mean, it happens. I was a bit nervous myself when I first met Mark. But in the end, I put that behind me and things started moving around. But after been living for about 2 to 3 months, Mark started to change in some of his behavior. And each bedroom has its own lock. I didn't mind if Mark locked his door to have his more privacy. But the thing is, he never had any of his family or friends or even his girlfriend or something came over. Over dinner, I just asked him if he had how come that none of his friends or family are coming over to see him. After all, my family had came over, or friends had came over a few times before, but I never saw any of his friends or his family. He said that his family lived out of state and that he was not originally from this state itself. And that okay, that makes sense. But at least his family could have make at least his parents could have made a little effort to maybe come to see his new place maybe just once or twice. But I can stand if they were living out of state and they were based in the work. But I said, what about some coworkers from his place? He said that they were nice people, but he wasn't really that close with much of most people there. And I respect that. Not everyone can be very close with some of your colleagues or anything like it. So, but after about 2, 3 months, things started to change. Every time when I said something about if he could take out the trash, I was like, okay, sure, I can do that. But and then suddenly start to like stop nagging me with the trash. You can take it yourself. Okay, I can understand if he had a bad day at work, but he started snapping at me a lot. I was like, really? It did not have to be snapping or anything, but one time when I made burgers and fries for ourselves to eat for dinner, he told me it didn't taste good. I was like, okay, I'm sorry if I cooked it wrong, but my food was actually good, but maybe he was just not hungry for hamburgers or something. I mean, to be honest, I always ask him the day before what he wants to have for dinner the next day. And one time when he asked for mashed potatoes and fish, okay, I don't mind. But the next day, he asked me what for dinner. I said mashed potatoes and fish. He said that he didn't want to have that. I said, I told him that you wished for that for half the next day, and he's told me I never said that. I want hot dogs. And I meant, Okay, I was like, okay, I can make your dinner for yourself then. So I started putting things behind me, all this. I mean, it was just small things. But then, one day when I came home from work, I did smell this strange smell in my apartment. I recognized this smell already. That was not a cigarette smell or something like that, but more as it was marijuana. He was smoking weed in my apartment. I did ask him at one point if he did smoke something, and he said, I have smoked cigarettes in the past, but not much anything like that. So, and I asked him about drinking. He said, I take a beer, occasionally, which I don't mind since I do it myself. But smoking weed is one line that I will not respect it. So when I get in, sure enough, he's sitting on the couch, watching some TV while smoking some weed. I ask him just calmly, Mark, what are you smoking? He just looked at me with like a snap there, like, mind your own business. And he just went back to watching TV. I know that not to argue with that. The next day, when I came home from work, I saw that Mark was on the couch watching some TV, and this time he was a bit more calmer. So I asked him about the weed, and he told me that he did in fact did smoke weed in the past, but he haven't been doing it much lately, and one of his colleagues asked him if he did smoke weed, and he said yes. And he offered him for a decent price. I told him, okay, if you want to smoke weed, but just don't do it in an apartment. And because the landlord may not take this so kindly. He could evict us if we find out if you were doing some drugs or anything in your apartment. And he just looked at me surprised and he nodded and understood that. And did he stop smoking weed? No, he lied. Because the very next day, I found that he had brought his colleague over home and they were smoking weed and drinking beer, just watching something on TV. I was like, I had enough. I just walked up to them and told his friends, can you please leave? And Mark just snapped at me like, hey, this is my friend. Show some respect, man. I told him, Mark, I told you firmly yesterday, you don't smoke weed in an apartment. If the landlord find out, who knows what he find out? I'll just blame on someone else. But I know for the fact that none of the other neighbors doesn't smoke this kind of thing, I told him. And how you know? I told him I have been living in this apartment for at least a few years. And I had known of the neighbors at the time, and I know them for a few years, and I know the fact that they don't smoke weed. Maybe a small cigarettes, but not weed. And I didn't want to have any of this being detected by the landlord. And he's like firmly told his friend, just come on, just leave this place. And when he came back, I told him once again, Mark, if you want to smoke weed, fine, but just don't do it in our place. I just want to be not. I don't want to lose our home. He once again apologized. Apparently, when he was doing smoking weed when I came home, he was pretty high, which is understandable about why he snapped. But now at least acting more calmly. But did he keep his promise? No. He was smoking weed, but not in the living room, but now in his own room, but with the door locked. And I couldn't do anything about it. I mean, I didn't have the spare key to his door. So, I told this later to Natalie when I was over at her place for dinner. I don't want to vent out what I've been doing and handling for the most part. She was like very sensitive. She felt empathy for what I was dealing with. But she told me as long as he doesn't do any other stuff, okay, makes sense. And after that, he stopped doing weed for at least a while, which I was glad for, because I was worried if my landlord would somehow find out about it. Because I did actually find out from the landlord once that he had an attendant or one of those residents that did smoke some weed and other things, and he was evicted for that because he has no policy. He has no policy for smoking weed or any other such things in his place. Cigarettes, fine. Cigars, fine. But weed and such stuff, weed and such stuff, not at all. But then, I also should mention this. We also had this big jar in the kitchen for like a spare change that we need if we were order pizza or if we needed some money to pay off some other things like if we need some this more like more as how to say reserve money or emergency. And I had one by the end of early that month. I counted that there was at least $1,000. But when I needed some of the money to pay, to just going some doing some grocery shopping, I noticed the amount of money had dropped drastically because it was the near top of the debt, but was nearly half left. Only half was left. I hadn't even spent that much of that money for the past 2 months or so. So I asked Mark if he had used some of the money, and I told him it's fine if you used it to repair some of things in your car or something. Just and all you have to do just let me know. I'm not mad if you borrowed some of the money. After all, that is emergency jar if we need it. And he said yes, that he did need it, some of the money because he had a car and that he didn't need have some replacement. So I kind of was like, okay, just next time, just let me know if you had to borrow some of the money. He nodded, and I did ask him how much he did take. He said about $300. I was like, okay, I know that sometimes being repaired some damn things on the cars can be expensive, so I put it as an excuse for much and accepted. But only 2 weeks later, I noticed more money had been taken. This time, it was around another 300. And did this happen frequently? Yes. Not every day, but it was like once a week. I was like, I understand if there was just one small repair to the car, but how many times did he have to make the same amount of repairs on his car? So I decided to confront him about this. I confronted him in his own room. Mark, are you spending that much money on your car? But he said no. Then what are you using for? Something else. More personal. Please don't tell me you're just going to strip clubs like that. He laughed like, no, not like that. Then what? Okay, fine. I'll be buying weed. Okay, since I knew that he did smoke, but don't tell me you were smoking. Nope, nope, nope. I'm not smoking here. I'm just buying it. How much do you buy? A certain amount for about a small amount of money. How small? And how often? One time in a week. How much? $300? $300 once a week? And how long has it been going on? About a month. He said nonchalantly. I was stunned. He had been taking our emergency money for this. I told him, Mark, you had almost drained our emergency money jar. There's almost nothing left. What would you do if that money is all gone? I'm sorry. I will not do that again. And somehow it didn't. Because ever since then, the money, I did put some more of my own money and he did the same thing. But then, soon enough, the jar was full again. But I did start to notice a few things that I had some first I misplaced. There were one pair of sneakers that I was very much liked. They were not that old, maybe just a few weeks old or a month old or something like that, but suddenly they were gone. I was like, did I throw them out by accident? I asked Mark if he's seen my sneakers, but he said no, he hasn't. Then I did notice that some other things started missing. Like, some of my games had gone missing. Like, there were only maybe just one or twice, but there were some like older games that I haven't played in a while. I started being wondering, what is going on? I know for a fact that I'm not the one who misplaced them, because I had them in a box. Then even some of my clothes got missing. I mean, like a shirt or a hoodie or something like that. But then, even when I get home from work, I didn't notice that some of my money in my wallet had been gone missing. I knew exactly Mark was behind it, but I didn't want to accuse him for this without any actual proof. But he didn't take that much money from my wallet, but only one time, like just a $10 bill. I asked him about it. Oh, sorry about that. I felt hungry for something to eat, and I needed some $10. I forgave him about that, but I told him just don't do it again. But that is not all of that. When Natalie would came over to spend time with me, after just watching a movie or anything, she told me that when I was in the bathroom or something, or when she was alone, he started to talk to her, which I didn't see at first when she mentioned that, okay, at least they're bonding to get to know each other better. But he was flirting with her. He told her firmly that he would have been a much better guy than me, and he tried to even seduce her or ask her out on a date multiple times. And even texted her with on my phone, pretending to be me, so to set up a date, and that he sent out the messages pretending to be me. I was like, so he could go on a date with her, or at least that we were supposed to be on a date, but then he claimed that he showed up instead for me. And in fact did that twice. I was getting enough of this. So one day, when I was over at Natalie's place, I talked to her about this. I had enough. I can't do this anymore. He'd been apparently taking on only things, because I managed to figure out that he was the one that had been taking my sneakers, some of my games, and some of my clothes, and even some more money. And for what? He was been selling them so that he can get money for his drugs, especially weed. I had enough. She told me that I should probably kick him out, but I had to go for the landlord and have an eviction, and I had enough. And honestly though, my relationship with Natalie was getting stronger. But then she said, "Why not you move into with me?" I was like, "Are you sure?" I mean, we did in fact talk about it, but she told me that she loves me more than anything. And this was like, "Sure, I will talk with the landlord by the end of the month so that I will move in with you." She nodded and gave me thanks for that. But I did mention this to Mark just in case I decided to do that though, but not until the end of the month. I did talk to the landlord, and he gave me a sign for to break the lease, and he was okay with it. But I said Mark could continue to live in the apartment if he wanted to, but I'm moving out. And since I didn't have much belongings left after he'd taken all that, I started being putting some of my things over at Natalie's place, like some small things like clothes, my Xbox, and the remaining games. I decided to let him keep my TV if he wanted to. I didn't care about that anymore. But then he started asking me what some of my things had gone missing. Oh, about that. Yeah, I actually sold them for this small amount. And then of course there was only about only a few days left. Mark lost his mind. Because when I came home, I just had been to a convenience store nearby, just grabbed something to drink and some snacks. I found out he had been smoking too much weed and he had two of his friends over and they were also smoking. I like, but I was like sighing like in my mind and like, at least only a few more days and I am out of here. And he was like, finally you're back. Did you get a snack that I asked you to? What? You didn't ask for the snacks, and this is mine. Give it to me. And he just grabbed my Dorito bags from my hand and the drink as well. Thanks. By the way, can you go get some more from my friends? Your friends could just go get these things themselves. They are our guests, he screamed. You should respect the name, our guest. I was like, I didn't listen to him. I just went to my room and closed the door. And he's still screaming, banging on my door, and like, you should do it. I told him, they are your guests, not mine. If you really wanted to have them to do it, just do it yourself. And he just screamed, and for maybe 10 more seconds, and then he stopped. And the next few days, I was walking on eggshells. Well, figure speech. And on the last day, when I came home from work, I was like so tired, and I was like, I just saw that Mark was on the couch, and then he was just watching, and I just decided, why not? Just spend one last day with him. We watched TV, and then he did something that unbelievable. He brought out something on on the table, and it was a bong, like some of those things that you smoke with. I was like, whoa, are you insane? But luckily for me, though, and I decided, I'm going to go to bed early, so I did. I locked the door just in case if something would have happened. And the next day, around early noon, I took my backpack and a suitcase, and he asked me, "Oh, are you going somewhere?" Yeah, actually. Oh, are you going back soon on your trip? Then I decided, since the day was I was moving out, I'm like, Mark, I'm afraid I'm not going on a trip. Oh, I'm moving out. He just looked at me with shocked. What? I told him, I'm moving out because I am tired of your constant lying and stealing. You can't lie, I said firmly. I know the fact you sold my clothes, my sneakers, my games, sold them for your cat so that you can buy you weed. And you're smoking bongs weed in our apartment. And you started hitting on my girlfriend for the sake God's sake. Who in the right mind do that? And he started lying that she came on to him. And that he had audacity to say Natalie was the one seducing him. But I thought said, no, she doesn't even like you. She thought that you were strange, creepy, weird. And the fact that I had agreed. But then he just stood up and started attacking me with more verbally, screaming, "Oh, then get out of here!" Oh, I told him. By the way, um, the landlord decided to raise some of the rent with since the current rent is about $2,500. Yeah, he decided to raise that for at least another 500. For $500. Yep. So yeah, and I already paid for my half for part of rent already for this month, so go like on your own. And then I left. He screamed at me, but I didn't care. I took the cab and went over to Natalie's place, and I moved in, and I was happy. About a year later, we got married. I mean, I did propose to her and we did have a small wedding. But during this time, Mark tried to reach out to me to please beg me come back because he couldn't afford living there. But I told him, I'm not on the list anymore. I'm not in a part of that. So, yeah. And that was the last time I even heard of Mark. Apparently, for one of my old neighbors told me that he was eventually evicted because he couldn't pay the rent. I was like laughing about it. I mean, it suits him. Because if he had been more calmer from the beginning, since Mark's constant lying, stealing my belongings, and smoking weed, and trying to steal my girlfriend, it is insane. I mean, I'm glad I'm out of there and that, and Mark, I don't want to ever see you again. Because living with you for a short time was the absolute living nightmare. So, Mark, please let us never meet ever, ever again.